All right, welcome to the next in the 67 steps, guidelines, rules. You're on a 67-day challenge. Stick to it to the end. Now, what we're going to talk about today is very interesting. It's got a lot of applications for different areas in your life. I call it, what's the fancy name I gave it here? Oh, yeah. Pareto Efficiencies and the Business Triple Entente. Achieving the ultimate win-win with a level 3 approach to life. So, you know, in the 4 pillars, health, wealth, love, and happiness, each of those we take as a whole, but we also take them individually. So there's holistic things you have to do right in your life to make all these work together. For example, if on your path to making lots of money, you alienate all your old friends and you lose your health, right? It's not a unified approach, because then, of course, you'll lose your happiness, and all you have is one of the pillars, which begins to crumble because you could just die of a heart attack. I had a friend very young recently, just had a heart attack. I'm sure it makes him and everybody remember about the shortness and mortality that we all experience and will continue to experience, as Sigmund Freud calls it, the dissolution of the body. But let's take something specific for your career. Whether you're an entrepreneur, and I hope at some point you take a stab at joining what I call the entrepreneur lifestyle. That's that dream that everybody has. I read about 90% of people dream about having their own business. Remember, you might not be a person who needs to be a solo entrepreneur. You could do it as part of a team. You might be a team player, but you could still be an entrepreneur nonetheless and take your own destiny in your own hands, which, by the way, is much less risky than people think. It's actually almost riskless if you compare it to relying on a corporate system that probably is going away step by step. So you got to understand some career stuff. You got to understand business stuff. You need to understand some entrepreneurialism, even if you're not a pure entrepreneur. And there was a economist by the name of Pareto, and now that's his last name. And Pareto is known, people talk about the 80-20 rule. You've probably heard that. Different people talk about it. You know that 80% of your results come from just 20% of your activities, so you should just focus on what's important. That's a good rule. But one of the things I like that Pareto also talked about is something called a Pareto efficiency, and a Pareto, which I call it Pareto opposite, inverted, is the inefficiency. So what is a Pareto efficiency? In every area of your life, you're going to try to pull off a Pareto efficiency, which is defined, in this case, I'm taking a little poetic license with it. It is defined as a win-win. Okay? Now, when it comes to your career and what you do to make money, and this really, of course, Pareto efficiencies I want you to do for everything. For example, you know, in a relationship with other human beings, love, social, friends, family, romance. At every level, the more Pareto efficiency you pull off, the more riskless the relationship becomes. See, sometimes people think that having a win-lose, where you manipulate another person into dating you, loving you, you know, you trick another person into being your friend, it seems at first that that's an effective way. And a lot of people look for little shortcuts, like how you can, you know, pick up artist, or not that all of those principles are bad, because being persuasive is important. But when it crosses the line into manipulation, you end up with a win-lose. You're trying to win at their expense. The problem is, as the old saying goes, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all the people all the time. So if your business model for health, wealth, love, and happiness, if your model of action is win-loses, what generally ends up happening is it turns into a lose-lose, or it flips. They win and you lose. It's an adversarial, competitive approach. And there's nothing wrong being competitive, but there's no reason to go to war if you don't have to. I forget what famous general I was reading about one of these super aggressive. Maybe it was Philip of Macedon, the father of, you know, Alexander the Great. These guys that certainly went to war a lot, but their default was always to try not. Yeah, it was. Alexander the Great's father was another great conqueror, Philip, and he would go to war, they said, with bribes and treasure chests and friendships, and Alexander the Great would also generally offer that same thing. Genghis Khan, even the most warlike of people, if they can pull it off, they're going to try to pull off some kind of a compromise, win-win type of situation, because going to war with people, figuratively or otherwise, is very dangerous. So in business, remember business and everything, every main action you take besides your own physical body, like what you eat or so on, it's generally a social experience. Even food, in a sense, is a very social thing. You rarely eat alone all the time. What's that one book, How to Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi? So for you, mastering Pareto efficiencies and mastering social interactions go hand in hand. And business is nothing more than a formalized approach to what? Anybody know what the purpose of a business is? Most people forget, but if you talk to the great Peter F. Drucker, he says, the purpose of a business, it's not what people think. It's not to create net profit. It's not to save the world and start charity, give to charities. It's not to pay its employees, and not to bring high ROI for the investors and owners. No, the purpose at the core, the one purpose, the highest purpose of a business is to create a customer where a customer didn't exist before. So that's an inherently social dynamic, right? You are making a friend, okay? Making an ally. So if you're writing this down, everything you do, whether or not you realize it, even extending into your physical health, but certainly your love and social life, certainly we know your happiness at a DNA level, at the wiring of your brain. As Jonathan Haidt says in Happiness Hypothesis, we need companionative love. That's how our brain is wired. We cannot be happy if we're lonely. Daniel Kahneman says, the Princeton Nobel Prize winning researcher found. Even money does make you happier, especially up to certain levels, but it doesn't if it at the same time increases your loneliness. So Pareto efficiencies, let's move into the way in which you're going to structure your career and your business, and how you either start your own business or what type of business you work for. And I say there's 3 kinds of careers you can pursue. The first, and this is what I call the business triple entente. That was the name of, in World War I, the triple entente was the name of the Allies, which were France, Russia, and the United Kingdom. Of course, the U.S. came in later, but you had the big, this set of allies. So that's how I remember this. Remember, I use a lot of mnemonics to remember the 67 steps. I suggest you do the same thing. The mind remembers stories, remembers figures, it remembers mnemonic tricks. So that's how I remember this specific 67 steps, even though we're not talking per se about World War I. But there's 3 ways, this triple entente, of how almost all ways of making money, they fall into one of these 3. So the first way is what I call level 1 business. Level 1 business is a Pareto inefficiency. That means one party wins, either the business or the customer, at the expense of the other party. Okay? Now, why is that bad? Well, as we talked about earlier, if you go to war, occasionally, eventually, you bump into the wrong person that's stronger than you, and you walk away limping. And you'll see this as I give some specific examples. There are many businesses that are win-loses, many activities. So, for example, we'll take the most obvious, a criminal. A criminal is a winner in his own mind, in the sense that if you rob a bank, that criminal, if he robs a bank, or she robs a bank, they walk out with money, which is great for them. And the loser would be society, the people who had made the bank deposits, the bank owners and investors, right? So what's the problem there? What happens if you rob too many banks? Eventually you get caught, and the losing party gets retribution, and they get you back. And if you're not careful in that scenario, well, you'll end up losing everything you gain. So it's a temporary win only. Now, what else? That's a blatant example, extreme example. What about fast food industry? So fast food, they win. I think it's about a $200 billion industry. I think McDonald's has about $20 billion a year. They're winning certainly, in the shareholders, which if you invest in the stock market is usually you and I. So when people want to occupy Wall Street, I'm like, well, you can occupy your own house, because if you have a 401k plan, you're probably an owner in the corporations that you may be boycotting. But that's for another conversation. People sometimes forget that. But anyway, you got a business where certainly making a lot of money, selling billions of burgers, whatever the fast food restaurant is. I'm not picking on one over the other. But is society really winning? Well, you guess you could argue it's cheap food, but that cheap food comes at an expense. I've traveled the world looking at agriculture. You got tremendous degradation of soil fertility, erosion, blah, blah, blah. So I was talking to a guy who works trying to save the rainforest in Brazil, and he said it's getting chopped down at whatever, 5,000 acres a minute, or I forget the number, some outrageous number. And a lot of that's going to grow food for fast food. So without getting into a conversation about sustainable agriculture, there's certainly health problems. The average American eats 3 times a week, I read, fast food. I read that book, Fast Food Nation, by, I think it's Eric Schlosser. Fascinating book. And so what's the end result? Are the people eating the food winning? No. You got diabetes on the rise, obesity at an all-time high. You have more fat people now in the world than you have malnourished, I read. More obese, I think. So huge problems, which leads to all kinds of problems. Huge strain on the medical and health insurance industry. Everybody talks about insurance and that it should be universal. Well, that may or may not be true. I'm not very political, but I'll tell you, you know what's better than trying to figure out the problem of whether healthcare should be universal? It'd be like, how can you work and reach the individual human brain so that people don't do things that every credible doctor in the world would agree harms your health. I'm not talking about eating an occasional out to eat. I'm talking about the consistent pattern of eating highly processed and food that's laced with salt, sugar, fat. I'm talking about being, this book Diet Cult, of being like literally in a cult of health food, but understanding just raw biology and science. So to me, that's a level 1 business. And I believe level 1 businesses are constantly threatened by other people going, hey, we're going to boycott your business. We're going to shut you down. We're going to sue you. We're going to create tremendous amounts of ill will and try to get rid of you. And you see that. And, it hasn't come to a head yet, but you never know. It might. And I'm not picking on fast food. There's some fast food places. It's not fast food necessarily in and of itself. There's some healthier places out there. And I expect society will wage war against fast food and they'll get healthier and healthier. McDonald's has already got more salads and things, light, all these things. You see the progression, because when you do too much of a win-lose, the loser, when you're asleep, comes back and tries to get you. So I generally recommend in your career, so whether you're an employee or whether you're starting business, try to stay away from level 1 businesses. You'll sleep better at night. You can make just about money not being in a level 1 business, and you cut out the risk of mass revolution, wiping you out. You don't want too much of a win-lose. That's why the human brain on an evolutionary scale has altruism built into it. Humans are not cutthroat as much as you think. How many people do you know that literally would cut your throat in your sleep? Not many. There's not many of those on the planet. Humans, that's a cognitive bias called Kantian fairness. The philosopher Kant, Immanuel Kant, talked about this. We have an inherent sense of fairness and justice that we're born with. Even a little kid will understand it, before he gets into philosophy class. So level 2 business, that's level 1. That's the lowest level. I'm recommending, if you're in that business, you set an 18-month plan to get out of it. You don't always have to do it. It's not a moralistic instantly get out. If you're working at a place like that, set an 18-month plan to get out of that. Level 2 business. And by the way, if you're an employee or an entrepreneur, if you do a level 1 business, the other problem is, guess who ends up wanting to be a customer and a worker, a co-worker, or an employee at a level 1 business? Usually level 1, lower level, lower consciousness, less interesting, more stupid, less, good people want to do that. If you go work at your typical fast food place, you're not necessarily surrounding yourself with the most interesting people. You might say, well, that's because they're young. But yeah, but there's young people all over that are sharp. So it like attracts like at a certain sense if you study social science. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But, employees, anybody that would continue to work for years at a level 1 business, you might not want to work for. It's like Groucho Marx said, I don't want to be part of any club that would have me as a member. I always thought that's funny, but there's truth to that. If I have a level 1 business and then I'm surrounded by level 1 people and there's career employees who stayed level 1, these people are everything I don't want to be around. I don't want to be around any club that I started that would have me as a member as a level 1 business. So remember, it's not black and white. Some businesses are part 1, 2, 3. There's all variations. What I want you to get from here is the general impetus, the general motivation to look deeper and get a sense and a feel for what you're doing. Level 2 businesses are neutral. They're not really Pareto efficiencies or inefficiencies. They're just, you own a hotel chain. You're not harming the world. You're not necessarily massively benefiting the world. Not to say that hotels, of course, have a purpose. It's just one that comes to mind, right? You're not revolutionizing the world with a hotel. You're offering a nice bed, and there's certainly something to hospitality. But it's a little more level 2, Although you certainly could make a hotel chain go from level 2 to what we'll talk about next, which is a level 3, a win-win. But I'm just saying the average, motel chain. I don't know, what's a coffee place or something? Coffee shop. Maybe that's level 3 in the sense it's a place for people to talk and have change and talk about great ideas, which I love, But what is another level 2 business? That in the mark of a level 2 business is for everything you could argue of how good it is, you can find some issues with it. If you own a coffee place, depending on where you get your coffee, there's probably some issues maybe with deforesting the rainforest or something like this. So level 2 are not overtly doing malice to society. And level 2 businesses are certainly a way you can make a lot of money. But as I say, the enemy of the great is the good. So level 2 is like a good business, a good career. But let's jump right into level 3 business. Level 3 business is a win-win. That means people will give you money, reciprocal altruism. They will pull out their wallet and give you money, and they love you when they give you the money. They're excited to give you the money. Good example, Oprah Winfrey. She is a woman who millions of people love her. Go on her Facebook. She has 8 million likes. She's got presidents. And I saw a thing years ago with Nelson Mandela. And then she's on Savard's orphanage. And all the while, other people feel like they're winning because they're learning. And they're, millions of people feel like they've learned about happiness and getting out of debt and all the stuff that Oprah's TV show and her magazine and her channel talks about. But at the same time, they're happy to pay her. She makes money through the networks, through advertising, through products she sells, and all this stuff. So Oprah's living the dream. She pulled off the ultimate career Pareto efficiency, that level 3 business. And notice she was able to make $2.2 billion. So going level 3 doesn't mean you have to give up income. I have a friend who makes literally $1 million a month or more personal salary. And he told me once, he's like, I wake up and every day I start out the day angry and unhappy. And I realized why. It's because he subconsciously, his brain, and probably consciously realizes he doesn't believe in the career he's in. His mind perceives it as a level 1 or maybe a level 2. And when you pull off a level 3 business, you get tremendous motivation. When you perceive yourself in a level 3 position, and remember, it's not cut and dry. Maybe if you're in a hotel and you're as an employee, you could elevate what you do, even though the hotel chain might be level 2. You could approach it as a level 3. You could say an extra word to somebody. You could, you know, if you're a valet, you could be a nicer valet. So many valets aren't that good. You could be creative. You could give a little, you know, give everybody a fortune cookie. I bet you if every valet handed someone a fortune cookie, or I don't know if that's the right thing, or a little quote or something funny or something, that you double or triple your tips. Because at the end of the day, don't ever get confused by the mass media and by people who don't understand what they're talking about and say that money is evil. Money's a tool. All tools, when wielded by fools, have the potential for great damage. But that's not an indictment of the tool. That's an indictment of the person who's wielding it, who's carrying it. So you can take level 1 to level, and it's hard to take level 1 and turn into level 3. If you're a bank robber, you can't just pat someone on the back and say, hey, have a great day, and expect that to take it away from a level 1. Now, I've had many different types of business. I've invested in some of all levels. I've been involved in level 1, level 2, and level 3. I haven't been involved in bank robbing, but there's level 1 businesses that are, that are legal. To be clear, level 1 does not mean illegal. So I've invested in, I own stocks, you own stocks, you're probably invested in level 1 businesses. And over time, though, I do my best to slowly but surely move my way out of them, if at all possible. Sometimes you can't, sometimes you're stuck and you have to deal with it. And I'm okay with that. I don't believe it's an exact black and white, but I believe if the general direction that you and I and society as a whole took toward level 2 and level 3, it would be the ultimate win-win. Everybody would be happier. You would be happier. Forget everyone else. You would have more health, wealth, love, and happiness. Because as I said, when the world, there's nothing wrong with competition in the sense that competition, if you read The Winner Effect, where's that book? I saw it here. I was just reading, or Poe Bronson has a book called Top Dog. Competition has tremendous powers to increase overall benefit to all involved. Because then, it's like working out. If you work out alone, you might be a little lazy. But if you have someone there in a friendly competition, you're going to push a little harder, get the burn a little more. So there's nothing wrong with competition, but when competition draws the line to taking advantage, manipulating the other party, then what happens is a tremendous inefficiency is created because we're expending all our energy in battle. And there's time, as Pat Riley, the great Lakers basketball coach, said, there's a time you have to plant your feet. His dad taught him this about bullies. There's a time when you have to run away, or there's a time you have to talk to that bully and say, hey, stop. But he said, there's a time you got to plant your feet, punch him in the nose. And that's what will happen if you're too involved in level 1. Eventually, someone's going to put their foot down and they're going to punch you in the nose. So level 3 business, what I've learned is you make the same amount of money with less friction, and it's more fun, and you sleep better than you do with level 2. And write this down. The level of forgiveness from your customers quadruples. If you have a level 1 business, it's a little manipulative, a little taking advantage. If you do anything wrong, if ever a group of them ever get in a forum, or if they ever join forces, there's no leeway because they don't like you, and the littlest thing will trip them up. Same with level 2. When you're level 3, you make a big mistake and everyone's like, you've done so much good for us. You've invested so much into us. We're going to give you a pass. And that lets you sleep good at night, knowing there's tremendous forgiveness. Joel Salatin used to say a good system has forgiveness built into it. A good farm where you have a lot of fertility when you've been taking care of the land well, you can have a drought. You can have a flood. There's more organic matter in the soil, which means it's healthier soil generally, and it means that there's more absorption. So when it rains really hard, it can absorb it, or when there's a drought, organic matter held moisture in the soil. So if you have a system on a farm that's done right, you do things right, in the long term, it will build more forgiveness so that when the dark days come, and they will come for you, they will come for me, they will come for your career, they will come for the business that you have built. Goodwill is kind of like the carbon in the soil I was talking about that gives you forgiveness, so that in drought, you'll have a buffer. In flood, you'll have a buffer. You need that buffer. Warren Buffett talks about that, saying you need what he calls a margin of safety. If he's evaluating the cost of a business and how much he should pay, he's a value investor. If he thinks it's worth $20 a share, but he's not sure, and it's selling for 21, he goes, you know what? That's too close. What if I miscalculated? I need a big space, a big margin of safety. If I'm gonna pay $20 from a share, I need to know it's worth at least 40. At least then I'm getting a good 50% off. That way, if I miscalculated it, it's actually worth, I actually should have paid, it's actually worth only $30, not 40. I still only paid 20. I got a margin of safety, a buffer. And you need a buffer in what you do in business, because things go wrong. People try to sue you. Business partners steal from you. There's an economic recession. Your idea doesn't work as well. Whatever it is, if you've been building up a tremendous amount of goodwill in your career by operating a level 3 business, you will get a pass. Now, you might not get the pass forever and not for everything you did, but it's a much better feeling. Like I said, I've been involved in level 1, level 2, and level 3. And now, if I can help it, I'm like, just let me stay on level 3. It's so much better. I wish I had somebody tell me this a long time ago. And it's interesting, the way I'm approaching it, a lot of people came and told you this at a moralistic way. They're like, well, don't do the level 2 business because level 3 is more whatever, spiritual and better. But that doesn't always work. You and I are naturally a little bit selfish. So I'm telling you, even if you don't care about other people, do it because it's better for you. You make more money with less stress, in less time, with less risk. And you'd be the most narcissistic, selfish person in the world. That's a good trade-off if the downside is 0. There is no downside. There's no less money. The only downside, conceivably, the only difference is you have to be a little more creative because you're going to cut out some businesses that you might have taken before, some opportunities that you might have taken before. Remember, this is not just for business. You can apply this to health, okay? There's some diets that people are eating, and I'm guilty of this sometimes too, where I'm getting healthier. It's like sushi. Some sushi, you should not eat certain fish because it's on the endangered list. I read an interesting book called Bottom Feeder, and I'm not a super environmentalist or whatever. I'm just a logical dude, right? I hate all the noise and chaos. I don't believe environmentalists have the full picture. I saw that at Joel Salatin. Sometimes they're worried about stuff that, like keeping a natural forest completely out of man's touch. That doesn't make sense because now these forests need fire every once in a while. They need a little man-made activity. They actually can be much more fertile that way. So extreme environmentalism, I tend to not agree with. In fact, it's like Charlie Munger said, avoid extreme ideologies. Anytime someone's too extreme, not always, but generally they're a little cuckoo and their ideas are inaccurate. Okay, so, but on the other hand, I'm not a complete, head in the sand and think there's nothing humans could do to mess up the environment. Well, you can mess up the environment. You can drop a nuclear bomb in the middle of a big city, like happened in various wars, and you'll have radioactive fallout, which affects everything, birth defects, all. So we can do both. And so what I was saying when it comes to Pareto efficiencies, what you eat, if you like sushi, maybe skip a few. You can Google them. The few fishes, don't eat. I forget what it is. I think certain kinds of tuna and there's some stuff that is not on the not in any danger at all. Eat more of that. Okay, so you get the win-win. You eat and get the good, munch on whatever you love to munch on, and the environment's not degraded. Don't do the win-lose. It comes back and bites you in the butt in the end. Same with social relationships. Don't try to manipulate people. You want to be persuasive. You want to be charismatic. You want to be liked. You want those things, but don't do it at the expense, because in the long term, if you do it at the expense of others, they're going to get you. And when it comes to happiness, people do win-loses when it comes to happiness. I'll give you an example. One of the cognitive biases is chemical bias. Sigmund Freud talked about this, that humans try to find happiness through chemicals. the problem with chemicals, not always, but often they are win-loses. Just think about alcoholism. In the moment that you drink, you're winning if your goal is to forget about your pain, right? You get a life you don't like, something, so you go drink it away. Well, that's a win, but think about the lose in the long run. Your body is degrading faster than it should. If you have a family or children, you're probably freaking out your kids by being this crazy person. You increase the chance of doing something dumb. You increase, what's the old proverb said? See a man who has bumps and bruises and don't know where they came from, you're looking at a drunk. So you got physical injury, you got chance of crashing, killing people, or going to prison, all this stuff. So if that's your methodology for happiness, it's like, that's a win-lose. And sooner or later, if you play with fire enough, the win-lose catches up to you. So find some other chemical bias, like, for example, become a runner or play basketball or lift weights because you can get an epinephrine, or not an epinephrine, what is it? I forget the name of the drug right now, but you can get a rush to your brain. Endorphins, thank you. Remembered. You can get a rush, that same thing that people get from drugs, but it's not a win-lose because you're getting in better shape and all that stuff. You get where I'm going with this, right? Always look for the win-win. I will tell you, okay, as I wrap up here, there are times where you will have to have a win-lose, where your back's to the wall, like Pat Riley said, where you got to stand up for yourself. Maybe there's a situation where physical altercation's about to happen. You've tried to get away from it. You've tried to broker a deal. It's like, hey, let's relax, guys, and we'll settle this, And somebody takes a punch at you, and you have a choice. Another human swinging a punch, if they knock you out, they could conceivably kill you when you're knocked out. So it's life or death. That's the time. When it's time to go for a win-lose, you have to go for the win-lose. I mean, unless you're maybe religious or pacifist, but, you might have to get them before they get you. Hopefully you do it not a crazy way, but, you got to subdue the situation for safety of you and your family. So there is a time where win-loses, I think, it's not that you want them, it's just you have no choice, right? You got to cut somebody off that's a friend, and they're going to feel like it's a loss and that you won. But nonetheless, when the time's right, if that's the appropriate thing to do, like Aristotle says, it's easy to be angry, be angry at the right person at the right time for the right reason, for the right duration. This is difficult. So for you to just, always do win-wins isn't enough. There's a time for win-lose. It's got to be the right place, duration, all those things, okay? So finish this up here. Unlock the next 67-day challenge step. Right below here, there is a comment box that we've been doing every day. And so the first thing is your current career. Number one question. Which of the 3 levels is your current career in? Level 1, 2, or 3? Okay? Second question. How do you feel about the level you're at now? I'm assuming maybe you're at level 1, level 2. Number 3, what's a transition plan to move up to level 3? And number 4, beside your career, what are things you could do to move them more into a win-win situation for your physical health, in the relationships you have with others, and in your own happiness? What's ways to do that? Give to charity. Other people win, and you'll feel better about yourself. And depending on what religion you follow, what belief system, usually what comes around goes around, right? So that's a win-win. So what's an example outside of business, okay, those other areas of your life that you can do in a more win-win scenario, okay? So do that below here in the community. Read what other people wrote. Comment there. Feel free to reply and comment. Put it in your private 67-day challenge, little private journal. You can ask me questions at tailopez.com on Twitter or tai@tailopez.com for email. And I will see you soon. Stay strong.